Toxic people don't fear your anger. They fear your indifference. There's a moment that defines every person's mental evolution. A point when you stop reacting to everything around you and start choosing your response. That shift, that's where power lies. Because the person who can remain calm when everything around them is designed to provoke them isn't emotionless. They're in control. Emotional detachment isn't about becoming cold or indifferent. It's about clarity. It's the ability to observe what's happening without being consumed by it. To see the pattern playing out in front of you and realize you don't need to participate. A lot of people confuse intensity with strength. They think if they raise their voice, if they react quickly, if they argue or prove a point, they're being strong. But true strength doesn't look like volume. It looks like composure. It looks like walking away when you could explode. It looks like choosing silence when your ego wants validation. And it starts when you train yourself to recognize that not every emotion you feel deserves a reaction. This is something that gets built over time. It's not a mindset you snap into overnight. You train it like a muscle. The next time you feel triggered, pause. Notice your breath, feel your body. In that space, you buy back your power, because the very moment you interrupt that automatic loop of reaction, you teach your nervous system that it's safe to stay grounded. Now, you might be thinking, but won't people think I don't care? No. What they'll see is that you can't be shaken, that you've built a kind of inner calm that can't be stolen. And that kind of energy, it commands more respect than any emotional outburst ever could. In fact, that's the version of you that's unbothered by chaos, that no longer dances to someone else's drama. And believe me, people notice. Especially the ones who once tried to control you through emotional turbulence. You're not denying how you feel. You're just deciding not to let that feeling run your life. That's a huge distinction. Emotional detachment gives you perspective. It allows you to assess a situation before you respond. And in a world where reaction is the default setting, your stillness becomes rare and powerful. When you act unaffected, you're not pretending. You're prioritizing. You're choosing your peace over temporary validation. You're choosing long-term composure over short-term chaos. That doesn't make you detached from life. It makes you deeply connected to your own values, your own internal compass. The truth is, people who are easily triggered are easily manipulated. The opposite of that is someone who responds with intention, not impulse. Someone who can stand in a storm and not let the storm get inside them. And that's exactly who you're becoming. Because once you learn to control your emotions instead of letting your emotions control you, the game changes completely. The ability to act as if nothing affects you starts with understanding the nervous system, your body's command center for emotional regulation. You can't fake composure long term. The body knows. Your heart rate spikes, your palms sweat, your breath shortens. That's your biology reacting to perceived threats, emotional or otherwise. But what most people don't realize is that you can train your nervous system to respond differently. You can reshape your internal signals so that what used to feel like an emergency becomes something you simply observe, process, and move through without being hijacked. This begins with awareness. When something or someone triggers you, pause and notice where in your body the response shows up. Is it in your chest, your jaw, your gut? That's the language of the nervous system. And instead of suppressing it or acting over it, we learn to breathe through it. Deep, controlled breathing, particularly through the nose, activates your parasympathetic nervous system. That's the system responsible for rest, digestion, and calm. It tells the body, you're safe. And when the body feels safe, the mind stops going into overdrive. Now, this isn't about pretending you're okay when you're not. This is about anchoring your sense of safety within yourself, so you're not depending on the outside world to validate how you feel. Because if the only time you're calm is when everything's going well, you're at the mercy of external chaos. The goal is to create internal stability, regardless of what's happening around you. Imagine you're in a conversation that would have previously provoked you. Someone says something disrespectful. Instead of instantly reacting, whether with anger, defense, or withdrawal, you observe. You feel the heat rise. You notice your jaw tighten. But instead of responding from that place, you take one breath. And then another, and suddenly you've created space. You're not suppressing how you feel, but you're giving yourself the room to decide how you want to respond. That single moment of pause, that's everything. That's the difference between letting your biology run your life and taking ownership of your state. And when this becomes a practice, your baseline changes. You become the person who doesn't escalate, The person who doesn't chase emotional highs or crumble under tension. You carry a stillness that isn't fake. It's earned. And people feel that. It's not about being emotionally numb. It's about being emotionally disciplined. You still feel, but you choose when and how to express those feelings. Over time, the people around you adapt to your energy. Toxic individuals, emotional manipulators, chaos seekers, they lose their grip because they can't trigger what you've already taken responsibility for. You become unshakable, not by force, but by foundation. That's the difference between reacting and responding, and it's the foundation for real power. One of the greatest shifts you can make in how you navigate life is learning to separate what's happening from the meaning you're assigning to it. When someone disrespects you, when you get overlooked, when something unfair happens, your initial emotional response isn't just about the event itself. It's about the interpretation your brain instantly attaches to it. That interpretation often comes from your past, not the present. Your nervous system is constantly scanning the environment, asking, am I safe? When it detects a threat, emotional or physical, it goes into protection mode. And most of us have been conditioned to associate discomfort with danger. But discomfort isn't danger. It's just sensation. The faster you can teach your mind and body that you can be uncomfortable and still okay, the faster you reclaim control. Let's take an example. Someone ignores your message. You immediately feel tension. Your heart beats faster. You start thinking, they don't care about me. I'm being rejected. I'm not enough. That cascade of thoughts. That's meaning making. The event is simple. A message wasn't answered. Everything else, your self-worth, your panic, your assumptions, is a projection. And projections are what keep us stuck in loops. Now, here's where the rewiring begins. You start noticing the pattern. You sit with the discomfort without assigning a dramatic narrative to it. You feel your body's reaction, but you breathe through it instead of reacting impulsively. In that space, you create freedom. Freedom to choose a new response. Maybe the person is busy. Maybe it's not about you. Maybe it doesn't even matter. You become less emotionally reactive and more emotionally resilient. And this isn't about suppressing emotion. It's about observing without immediately attaching identity to experience. The body reacts, but you don't need to go with it every time. You can sit inside the reaction without letting it define you. That is where real confidence is built. Not in perfection, but in mastery of your own state. Over time, you'll notice a shift. What once triggered anxiety will now only register as a slight nudge. What once kept you up at night will fade into background noise. Because you've trained your nervous system to recognize the difference between a real threat and a perceived one. You stop living in defense. You stop operating from fear. And suddenly, people can't throw you off center so easily. They sense that emotional steadiness. It's not cold. It's not detached. It's grounded. You're present, aware, but not owned by external noise. The moment you stop giving automatic meaning to other people's actions is the moment you stop letting them control your peace. We often talk about strength as something loud, something seen, something displayed, something shouted from the rooftops. But real strength is much quieter than that. It's not in how forcefully you respond. It's in how little you feel the need to respond at all. It's the ability to remain internally stable when everything external is trying to provoke a reaction out of you. When someone is pushing your buttons, testing your patience, saying things they know will get under your skin, that's not about you. That's about them. That's about their own dysregulation, their need for control, their need to feel powerful by making someone else feel small. When you rise to that bait, when you get pulled in, you're giving them exactly what they wanted, your energy. And not just your attention, but your emotional regulation, your center of gravity. So what does it look like to not give that to them? It means resisting the urge to defend yourself when you don't need to. It means recognizing that not every battle deserves your presence. It means understanding the distinction between reacting and responding, and more often than not, choosing to do neither. Because you're not proving anything by engaging. You're not winning anything by trying to correct someone who is committed to misunderstanding you. There is incredible power in being unshakable, and that power is built in small moments, those split-second decisions where you pause, breathe, and stay still instead of firing back. You're not repressing your emotions, you're directing them. You're reminding yourself that your peace is more valuable than being right, being heard, or being liked by someone who isn't operating from a grounded place. People who are committed to dysfunction thrive on chaos. It's the language they know. So when you stop speaking that language, when you stop engaging in dramatic back and forths, when you stop participating in the emotional roller coaster. They lose access to you, not because you've shut down, but because you've risen above the need for validation or control. You begin to choose dignity over drama, and that choice is what makes toxic people uncomfortable, because they can't play the game if you're not playing back. They can't manipulate someone who doesn't react. They can't destabilize someone who has already made peace with not needing outside approval to feel grounded. Let your silence say what your words never could. Let your stability speak louder than any defense you could make. You don't need to match their chaos with chaos. You win by making your peace louder than their noise. Most people underestimate the power of environment. Not just the physical space you occupy, but the emotional and psychological climate you allow around you. If you surround yourself with toxicity, even if you think you're not absorbing it, you are. Your nervous system doesn't just process the words people say. It picks up on energy, intention, and tone. And when you're constantly exposed to people who drain you, belittle you, manipulate you, or make you question your worth, your body and brain begin to adapt to that chaos as if it's normal. That adaptation is dangerous, because the longer you're around dysfunction, the more it starts to feel familiar. And familiarity can trick you into thinking something is safe. But what's familiar isn't always what's right. Sometimes we stay in toxic dynamics not because they're good for us, but because they're predictable. And predictability feels comforting when we're uncertain, but comfort can be a trap when it comes at the cost of your self-respect. So you have to get brutally honest with yourself about the environments you tolerate. You have to ask yourself, do I feel calm after spending time with this person, or do I feel anxious and off-center? Do I feel empowered, or do I feel small? These aren't just passing moods, they're data, they're information. And your nervous system is constantly collecting that data, shaping how you see yourself and how you move through the world. You can't change people. You can't control how someone shows up in your life, but you can control your proximity to them. You can create boundaries so strong they're not just lines, they're walls with doors that only open for those who've earned it. And earning it means respecting your peace, your values, your emotional space. When you deliberately choose an environment that supports your growth, people who challenge you but never belittle you, who see your potential and speak to it, who call you out in love, not control, you start to recalibrate. Your baseline shifts. You begin to expect peace instead of chaos, and you recognize sooner when something or someone is disrupting that. And when toxic people realize they no longer have access to you in the same way, they'll test those boundaries. They'll show up with guilt, manipulation, or even a new disguise. Because people don't give up their power easily when they've gotten used to having access to yours. But this is where your discipline comes in. Your ability to hold the line. Not just once, but consistently. Not just when it's convenient, but especially when it's hard. Because every time you reinforce those boundaries, you're telling your nervous system, this is what safety feels like. This is what I deserve. This is the standard now. And the moment you begin to live by that standard, the people who can't meet it will either rise or they'll remove themselves. Either way, you win. There's something powerful that happens when you stop reacting. When you stop allowing your nervous system to be hijacked by the energy of others, especially those who thrive on creating chaos. The truth is, toxic people feed off emotional reactions. They bait you with drama, guilt, passive aggression, or blame, not because they want resolution, but because they want to know they still have control. They want to feel that your emotional state depends on their behavior. And every time you react, you're confirming that for them. But when you remove the reward, when you stop giving them your energy, you take their power away. Not in a way that's aggressive, not in a way that's spiteful, but in a way that's rooted in calm, grounded clarity. You're not ignoring them out of fear or passivity. You're choosing non-reaction as a form of strength. You're creating emotional distance not because you don't care about yourself, but because you care too much to keep feeding a dynamic that only erodes your mental and physical health. This isn't about becoming numb. It's about becoming selective. There's a difference. Emotional detachment, when done in a healthy way, is not the absence of feeling. It's the ability to feel deeply without being controlled by those feelings. It's the capacity to sit with discomfort without needing to explode, lash out, or over-explain. And more importantly, it's the ability to recognize what deserves your attention and what doesn't. The most resilient people I've studied, the ones who operate with inner stillness even in the midst of external noise, are not emotionally cold. They're emotionally trained. They've built the internal infrastructure to withstand manipulation, criticism, and emotional bait without crumbling. That's not something you're born with. It's built through consistent practice, through breath work, through awareness, through reflection, and through repeatedly choosing not to engage with what drains you. When you start applying this to your life, when you respond with silence where you used to argue, with composure where you used to react, you'll notice something interesting. Toxic people either escalate in a last-ditch effort to get a rise out of you, or they eventually walk away. Because without emotional access to you, they lose interest. They move on to someone else who hasn't yet learned what you now know. So if you're in a place right now where you feel pulled into emotional drama again and again, remember this: you don't need to win the argument. You don't need to justify your peace. You don't need to prove anything. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to dance with dysfunction. Let your stillness say what your words no longer need to. When you begin to master your inner state, when you stop reacting, when you stop seeking validation from people who only offer you chaos, when you act from grounded clarity instead of emotional impulse, you stop being someone toxic people can manipulate. You stop being a mirror for their dysfunction and instead become a boundary they can't cross. This version of you, the one who chooses peace over performance, purpose over approval, becomes the version that toxic people fear most. Not because you're aggressive, but because you're unshakable. That's not just strength. That's freedom.